What's up, friends and listeners? You're about to hear a new episode of Disrupting with Ashley Holt. That would make me Ashley Holt. Thank you for stopping by. Disrupting is about people who are quite literally allergic to the status quo in our world. They have to make a shift or a change when they see something that needs changing. So those are the conversations I'm having with my favorite social media follows, experts, maybe a celebrity or two could pop up. We're going to manifest that together. And just some of my friends that I know we're doing amazing work for the world around us. I'm so excited for you to hear these conversations. Don't forget to like and subscribe on your favorite platform so you get notifications about new episodes, and leave comments for me. I love your feedback. Let me know what questions you want to ask, who you want me to reach out to for an interview, so that we can get started on disrupting the things in this world that we need to change together. Preston Mitchum, thank you for joining me. I have to say, it's interesting talking to you now because I feel like I know you already. So please excuse me if I'm like talking to you like I feel like I know you.
No, let's be friends. It is good.
Honey, it's done. Don't even worry about it. So I want to get the introduction proper. So excuse me for reading, but Preston Mitchum, so that people know who you are. Thank you for joining Disrupting. I reached out to you because I feel like I know that you are a disruptor. You are the founder and CEO of PDM Consulting. It's a firm centered on the power and progress of Black people, LGBTQ plus people, and young people. You're a publicist, attorney, civil rights advocate, and a cast member of Summer House Martha's Vineyard. I don't know when you sleep, but you are also, most importantly, the orator of one of the newest, most iconic Bravo lines. If you want to make a scene, I can make a movie. I need everybody to understand that this is history that we're speaking with right now. Preston, thank you for coming.
Of course, thank you. And for folks who may not know, I actually have merchandise coming out with that exact quote on it this week. Yes.
Listen to me. As soon as you said it, I jumped off my couch. Like, I need the shirt immediately. Are you
Yes.
kidding me? Oh my, have you heard that somewhere? Did you come up with that on the spot? Like
You know
sitting?
what? I don't even remember. I remember I was just, when I was being interviewed in the green screen about it, I'm just like, you know what? What was actually in my head at this moment where I was really annoyed by something? And I'm just like, I've heard of the expression, like, if you want to be funny, I can be hilarious. And
Yes.
so like this was kind of felt similar to something like that.
I don't know how they're going to put it in the BravoCon like museum somehow. They need to listen. Congrats to you. I don't even understand how you came up with that, but thank you so much for that moment. Many of us
Thank
needed
you.
that so we can have a new warning for when people try us. So thank you for that. We are going to get into Martha's Vineyard in a second, but I do want to talk about the work that you do, the disrupting that you do. I ask everybody this question to start. What happened in your life? What experience did you have? What person did you meet that made you want to shake the table?
It was so many things, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I have a mixture of things, both like tragedy and just exhaustion that really caused me to be a disruptor. And I really appreciate that word and being used for me because that is how I see myself. And I don't think I knew that that was the word I would use. I really think a lot of it starts with my journey, unfortunately, with sexual assault and sexual harassment. And for a lot of that, I think I actually started to really retreat into myself for a long time when I experienced sexual assault. It made me quieter, like less comfortable, less confident. And I think after a while, I started to really just become a little bit more understanding about my body,
Mm,
understanding more about, why people do the things they do, right? Like why folks actually like lean into this world of irresponsibility and neglect sometimes, and it made
mm,
me angry. And I think, through years of therapy, it was that anger that was really channeled to my voice, right? And actually figuring out how to actually channel my energies accordingly, who to direct my frustrations to, how to actually engage in organizing, activism, writing, etc. And I think that's where a lot of my journey, though an unfortunate one, kind of started really me understanding myself, understanding my body, being more in tune with sexuality and freedom and
mm,
liberation. And then, a lot of it was just my introduction to things like anti-Black racism, my understanding of intersectionality as a framework beyond theory, but seeing how myself as a Black queer man existed in this world and
right.
sometimes didn't exist or was relegated in this world, and all of that together, quite frankly, is what made me the person I am. Like, I always share certainly like tragedy should not do that, right? Like we should not be born, or at least our experience and who we are should not be born out of tragedy. But sometimes we do have those instances that are kind of north stars, if you will, like the defining point of where our moment in time starts to like the journey of who we ultimately are.
Right. And I think, we hear so many people talking about like turning pain into purpose or giving a voice to the
Hmm.
voiceless, like all of these cliches that we hear that do actually come from a real place. I think it's important to share with people what that process is of like, I feel like
Hmm.
people go through something and they feel like they automatically have to make it positive without really acknowledging, like, no, I went through something. So let me handle
Hmm.
that first and then figure out what it means later. How much
Yes.
time did it take you to really understand what you went through, cope with it before you then went into action?
I appreciate you saying that because if I'm being honest, it is a consistent journey. I still
Mm,
don't know if I actually have truly processed it. Like I think
mm,
for like it was 25 years ago.
yeah,
And I still think for me, I am constantly processing many different experiences from that one experience or several experiences, right? But from a singular event ultimately,
right.
ultimately, right, I was a child, right, preteen. And so for me, oftentimes when I got older, I started to think about wow, like age of things happening, sexuality of things happening, my confusion with my own sexuality, given that it was a man who sexually assaulted me when I
Mm,
was 10, 11 years old, right?
wow.
Like it is all of these things that I've oftentimes thought about and still think about as I navigate these phases. And I want to be honest, like moments like this are exactly why I'm always so grateful for the opportunity to be on these major platforms now because the reality is, I did not think that it would be my experience, my life. Like, if
Mm,
I really peeled back the layers of my life, I would not and should not be here, like literally
wow.
here physically on this earth. And
Mhm,
so I am always indebted with gratitude for even, the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of it, because at least I have the opportunity to make the mistakes that I can then correct.
right.
And so, I really appreciate this point because I never want people to just go into overdrive after experiencing trauma, after experiencing tragedy. You're right. There is a time you have to kind of sit with it. And I mean, with all of it, right? Your anger, your confusion, your frustration, your bewilderment, right? All the things that you can think of, feel all of those feelings. Because the truth is, if you just jump right into it, while you think that is part of the healing journey, right? Like I don't know if you'll ever fully be healed, right? But
Yeah.
I certainly don't think the journey is like diving right into it because for some, maybe that's a problem solve. For me, that's usually a form of escapism.
Yep.
And I think we all have it, but I don't think it's all healthy.
Right. And I do want to talk to you about one of the first things I remember seeing of you on Summer House. You were talking about how you reconcile with the term Black excellence. And so I want to
Hmm.
talk to you about how you communicate your feelings, your perspectives to
Hmm.
people, because I feel like we're all on that journey, right? Especially as Black people. I
Hmm.
was just having that conversation with my friend the other day, how we're so
Hmm.
used to having to run through brick walls to get our point across that sometimes we never learn how to like calmly have a conversation with somebody who just wants to understand. So, and you
Yeah.
actually, I was just on your consulting website's Instagram,
Hmm.
and y'all have, it says Black excellence will not save us. So, your
Hmm.
perspective on Black excellence, some people may not have heard. How do
Hmm.
you communicate those things to people? Do you decide when and where? Are you thinking like, oh, this ain't
Hmm.
the time, or no, this person needs to hear this today? Like, how
You
do you
know,
even approach that? How have you grown in that?
it's always case by case for me
Mhm.
because there are times people will tag me in something and it's like this is an example of black excellence and I know they don't mean it in a harmful way, right?
Okay.
They're genuinely complimenting me, right? Like
Yes.
they're not trolling because of episode 1 season 1 right? They are very much believe that that is the case. And those are examples where I'm like, I'm not about to reply back, no, did you see this
Oh,
example? I
right,
hate
right.
like I just thank you, right? It's also right a great compliment there. I think for me, when I oftentimes do decide to engage in this conversation, it is really when I'm in a group setting, ultimately around folks who honestly kind of look like me and have the same
Mhm,
accolades that I have.
mhm,
Because I think for many people, they were shocked at my pushing back. And let me be clear, it's not really pushing back on the language as much as who has the ability to be part of that language.
mm,
And so now I kind of discuss hashtag expanding Black excellence. So other people who are not usually seen, celebrated, or receive with all the, you know, adulation and the applause can also fit within that definition. Most of the people who are in my family, right? And so, you know, and I think some people know that it's not like they don't intend to be harmful when they say it,
Right.
right? Like, I think for all intents and purposes, it was an expression that started to celebrate Black folks who have made it in this very anti-Black society. And I think that is a beautiful thing to celebrate. And at the same time, I'm like, well, why is it only people with all these degrees and accolades and inventions? Like that's not the vast majority of humans. And it's
Mhm.
also not, certainly because of these systems, not the vast majority of Black folks. And so when I say things like Black excellence will not save us, I even go a little deeper, right? I started to think a lot about this during 2020. Certainly police brutality has existed for so long. But at the same time, we were seeing people literally lose their life in the public health crisis, obviously vis-a-vis COVID-19. We also were seeing an uptick in police violence, which was really fascinating how we saw that uptick because most people were in the house,
Inside, yeah.
right? So at the same time people were engaging with this public health crisis, they were also protesting a lot of the things that were happening, like violence against Black folks, violence against LGBTQ folks, violence against women and girls. And for me, I'm just like, you know what? While we're discussing all the beauty and accolades and celebratory and other achievements, people are literally dying,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I just couldn't reconcile with like this. As long as you got a degree, got money, got a house, got all these things, you'll be okay. And it's like, do the police know that? Does the healthcare system know that?
Do they
Right?
check
Like,
your background first? Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
And then even more things, right? I started to really evaluate like people, Black folks with college educations, right, were actually still making less money in some instances than white men without a college degree,
Mm.
right? Like no matter, like irrespective of our like collegiate background or even our wealth, like a lot of Black folks were still being diagnosed with COVID-19 faster than white folks who, right, did not have college
Right.
degrees or were actually, you know, didn't even have health insurance, right? And these were things that were studied, right? And it
Yeah.
was data points backed up by the CDC, NIH, among others. And so I'm like, well, why does Black excellence matter at all then? Like, you know, if it's
Mm.
not even actually helping our ability to navigate and ascend, what does it all mean? And so 2020 and beyond was really what started to make me question a lot of that.
Right. Okay. And I was gonna bring up 2020 to you
Hmm.
because we have to. Because
Yeah.
when you talk about diversity and inclusion, and first of all, they were using that, and what I hate saying they and not saying who, but
No,
you know what I mean. Like
I do.
there were people trolls on the internet who were referring to even
Hmm.
Baltimore's mayor as the DEI
Right.
mayor, and he's out here
Right.
speaking about a tragedy. And
Right.
so when you talk about how our country was
Hmm.
discussing diversity in 2020 versus 2024, we are
Right.
looking at very different things. Even, I mean, from coffee shops to Congress,
Yep.
very different things. How do you reconcile with that? And as for your consulting firm, how do
Hmm.
you approach that when you're trying to help businesses, corporations, organizations?
Mm, it's really fascinating, right? Because DEI is really just a supplanted word that people want to use when they know they can't say what they really mean and how they,
Yes.
right? And what they really want to say. And so, but we've always known that, right? DEI has obviously been a thing long before 2020, but of course, it's been the thing that, you know, really gained a lot of momentum in 2020
Mhm.
and then quickly became deflated in 2022 and 3 and now
No.
2024. It's particularly frustrating though. It's a little sinister in a way because you know I will never forget one of the best episodes I ever listened to in a podcast was Code Switch, and the title of it was The Racial Reckoning That Wasn't. And I
Ish.
love this podcast in episode specifically so much because it, I mean, not only provided like the nerd in me with like the data points and the metrics, it was really just discussing in a very storytelling way, like what people meant when they said racial reckoning and actually how people started to not support things like BLM right after, right, the violence that we saw in 2020 and 2021. So that question for a lot of people was, what was all of this? Like, what
Mm.
was all of this fake like support for DEI? Why were you all hiring people to be DEI experts and then quickly being the first to be fired?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why is it that you're asking all Black and brown people to be DEI experts when many of us are not, right? Many of us just
Mhm.
are happen to be Black, right? That is not
Correct.
the same thing as being an expert, right, in the study of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, I'm grateful that a lot of the work that my firm does, and we still get a lot of requests from nonprofits, some corporations, but mostly nonprofits, who really do want to be better. But the honest truth is, I don't know if many of them really understand where they're messing up and really understanding just how much room they have to grow. Because and that's actually, to be honest, I've experienced a lot more resistance from nonprofits than private sector companies.
Really?
And mostly, I should say. And I think a lot of that is because when you are a quote unquote do good, mission driven organization, you already believe that you have this understanding of a better
Mm,
world, right? This more just centered or equity driven world. But then you quickly realize they don't, right? When you look at their boards, when you look at their C suite, when you really look at pay equity and wage gaps, a lot of them look just like the corporations that they criticize, right? Or the government
mm,
that they tend to criticize. And so that's when it became fascinating to me. Like most of my career has been in nonprofit work. And so whenever I would hear people who I know worked at these massive organizations discuss, the anti-Black racism in their organizations and their companies, I'm like, y'all have no idea how nonprofits are because at least y'all get paid to deal with some of that mess. Like nonprofits will pay you five digits a year and then ask you to fix the entire
yeah.
company,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
while then like telling you that how dare you not because you're a mission driven organization, we're a mission
Right.
driven organization.
Hmm.
So I've always been a little flustered with like this DEI conundrum because it has obviously existed. The difference is people were at least faking about it the past few years. Now they don't have to anymore because they
Mm,
have these elected officials who are agreeing with him. They have these media pundits who are agreeing with them, and they're actually like getting paid to do so through their media, through their marketing, through their advertisers.
right. And I do wonder, how do you even, like, you obviously have all of these titles and have done the
Hmm.
research and done the work, but like, what advice do you give to people who are like the only Black person at work? And they're like, this is,
Yeah,
or for people, I've been in that situation when you are
yeah,
asked to be the DEI advocate, or, well, and I
hmm,
inserted myself as a DEI advocate and they fought
for
me
sure.
on it. So I'm
Yep,
sure either, people have been in one situation or the other. Do
hmm.
people ask you how to handle that stuff? Like, because it's
They
like, well, I need
do.
my job, but also this is crazy.
They do. And you know what? It's truly hard feedback to give because the easy feedback I can give, which is easy only in the sense that I do think it's beneficial to them, but only if the company has the extra money to do it, is always say there are certain things that I would not want you saying as an employee of your organization, right? Like if you know
Mm,
you're going to be the first line of defense and they're going to attack you or maybe let you go because you do say the truthful thing, then don't risk it, right? Like actually
right.
contact a consulting firm like my firm, like me to come in, clean it up, do, have speaking engagements, do trainings, etc. So that has worked many instances. Like many
Mm,
times they've actually done that. I've spoken with PepsiCo, law firms, nonprofits because of people I knew there, because of the frustrations that they presented me with.
interesting.
And they were able to actually get me to come in and do trainings or speaking engagements. I think other times it's difficult, right? I think I would never tell someone who actually feared risking or fear losing their job to say something, right? Like I think that you have to weigh it out, right? It's truly a cost benefit analysis there, like because there are some people who work for places that believe they are good,
Oh yeah.
right? That the higher
Oh
ups
yeah.
believe that they are doing just fine, and it's like, is you saying something actually going to help that, or is it going to hinder you there?
Mm,
And that's an example where I'm like, you know what? If you can make it, right, make it and do the best you can do it. There are other places where people do have a little bit more leniency, or at least the leverage, or at least the false idea that people want to hear negative feedback
hmm.
and that they'll do something about it. But a lot of that it's truly case by case. But I do like to actually offer myself up for those services if it makes sense for them to do so. But especially if they know if they were the one to say it, that they would risk losing their jobs.
Yeah, and that's really smart as someone who went into the corporate world guns blazing, talking about
Hmm.
myself. Suggesting other people that they can pay to do it, much
Hmm.
smarter. Like
Yeah.
do it that way, makes
Hmm.
your life easier. Because I mean, like, I feel like we all come out, like people who want to see equality and you see what's wrong in the world, we all come out of college radical, right?
Right.
Ready to
Right.
fight.
Right.
And
Exactly.
then you realize, like, wait, rent is due whether
Yep,
equality is around or not. So let me do
exactly.
this in a smarter way. So I also
Mhm,
wonder, in one of my jobs, I had like a really amazing white ally who would see like
mhm,
passive aggressiveness with
yep,
people and bosses and how they communicated with me versus other people, and they would speak on it. I didn't have that at any other job. What is your advice to white
mm,
people who like want to do good, but they want to keep their jobs
yeah.
too? Do you know what I'm saying?
I
Like, but they
I
do have
am
more leverage.
Yes, I am so happy to hear you say that you at least had someone in some
Oh
respect,
yeah.
because there are so many people who have come to me, because I want to be honest, it didn't matter the job that I worked at. I knew I was risking losing my job by speaking up, and I would always speak up. And that's not like a pat on my back. That is really, I just couldn't take it. Like
Right.
I like for me, I was like, I can't. I actually genuinely, in good conscience, can't hear certain comments and be like, oh, that's fine. Some
Right.
people can, and
Yes.
I salute them if they can. For me, that's just not. That's just, I'm
In
not built
you.
that
Yeah.
same way.
I'm saying. Yeah.
And and then I would have some of my white counterparts and colleagues come up to me after a meeting. This is especially when we were in person. They're coming to me after a meeting and be like, "Oh, you're so brave for saying that. I really agreed with you." And I'm like, "Well, tell them
Right.
that you agree with me."
Right.
It's like it's always folks from marginalized backgrounds have to be the ones to speak up in these meetings, just to be told after the fact that we were right all along. We
Mm-hmm.
don't need to hear, we know we're right,
Yep.
right? Which is actually why we're sharing it in the first place. I think for anyone who is white or just non-black, if they want to speak
Yeah.
up for black folks, the goal is to be a co-conspirator and not just an ally, right? For me, the
Mm,
difference that I oftentimes break it down with is allyship is a beautiful thing, and it's many people start. It should be people start, but the problem is many of them treat it like the end. And so, like co-conspiratorship, accomplishship, really for me, the idea is that you are actually getting in the weeds with your black counterparts, right? You're
mm.
actually calling out what you're hearing, because the truth is you do have more of that leverage.
Yep.
It's just the world that we live in. And certainly, right, there is a point in time where I do think even they can burn themselves out. But the reality is, no matter where someone is working at, including black organizations, white
Mm.
people and non-black people can get away with a lot more than
Yeah.
black folks who work there.
Yep.
And so I really think that if you actually care, don't talk to me in happy hour about how you agree with me.
Woo!
It's not cute, right? Like
Doesn't I can't
it's also
cast
not
that here.
helpful, right? It's also not helpful. It doesn't increase my performance review, right? It doesn't help my
Mm,
salary. Like
hmm.
actually saying the things that you are claiming that you know to be true, say it to them, right? Like say it to your folks. And I think there's a way that can be read a lot more favorably and positively.
Yep.
Because black folks, let's be clear, especially black women, are ultimately, unfortunately, in a lot of those spaces are read as more hostile, more
Yep.
aggressive, as if, and then, right, are undercompensated about it too. And so there's just a lot there. And I just really wish people truly put their money where their mouths are, not only in terms of donations, right, and other
Mhm.
things related to that, but in terms of like if you actually care about your colleague and you call them your friend, for me, it's like, why did you let so much pass then if we're actually colleagues, if we're friends?
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I have to say, I've seen it work. Like
Yes.
this
I've
is
seen
not
many
blowing smoke.
examples where it has worked. So like I've seen
Yes.
many examples where it's literally I would start to say something in one setting and finally it got through to one of my colleagues and they were like, "No, may I interrupt?" Okay, I just want to
Absolutely
say,
you
right?
can.
And that was an example where literally everything felt deflated. Like it automatically put me at ease because I was like,
Yes.
finally, out of my 15 years work experience, one person just spoke up for
Yep.
me.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay. If you don't mind, I do want to shift to Bravo now
Of
because
course, of
there
course.
are so well, oh my
A
goodness.
lot
First of
to
all, Bravo needed this show, first of all,
Mhm.
because I feel like there is, I mean, let me just put out there. I'm a Black millennial, so I'm biased. I feel like Black
Mhm.
millennials really determine what's hot on reality TV a lot of the time. It's like us
Mhm.
and probably like white mothers that watch the most reality television. So this show, I
Yep.
feel like represents me the most that I have seen in a very long time. So I appreciate you guys for that. I also
Absolutely.
watched the other Summer House, so I can
Mhm.
say confidently you are the only openly gay cast member on
Yep.
any Summer House show on
Mhm.
Bravo. Did that make you nervous? How did you approach
Yeah.
that?
I will say Bravo initially did have one gay character, like, somehow in the very
In the
beginning,
very beginning?
like
Mhm.
literally very beginning. So it's
Mhm.
been years. Um, I don't know if it made me well, yes. It made me nervous, but it didn't make me want to shift and change who I was, if that
Right.
makes sense. Like I've been pretty confident, comfortable with who I am. I think what made me more nervous, if you will, is that I am very proudly gay and I'm
Hmm.
very proudly black. And so I think like those are the things that, blend together in a way that may be received well, may not be received well,
Yeah.
depending on the audience. Because most of my friends, 99% of my friends are black, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of them are black queer folks. And
Hmm.
so when sometimes when people tend to look at you, they'll obviously, if you're on TV, they'll go to your Instagram and your Twitter and all this other stuff. And not only, right, am I one of the first in a long time, and I'm not, right, obviously a side character, I'm also very, very outspoken publicly. And so, that's just, I think it comes with the territory too. Like you can Google me and find my clips on Fox News and like
Hmm.
different things where I've talked about a lot of these very hot button political issues. And I don't think Bravo, even if they've had a queer person, a queer man, they've certainly never had someone like me on their network. And I think that is what made me, if anything, more nervous than just obviously being black and queer.
Yeah. And we've heard so many people talk about it as a platform. Like the fourth wall is totally down over at Bravo at this point. Like
Right,
people are
right.
very obviously like, I have a business. I'm,
Yep.
whatever, like doing this, doing that. And so you have shared on your social media, like this platform, obviously you have wanted to use it for very particular reasons as well. So how did you
Hmm.
even like prepare for that? I feel like our generation is so entrepreneurial. So did you have
Yeah.
like a strategic plan? Obviously, you have a team on
Mhm.
this call. Like you're not just out here
Yeah.
just like floating.
Yeah, but you know what? In the beginning, no, and I think you could tell that through some of my wardrobe, through like, like, like I ain't saying I ever dress poorly, but I certainly have
No,
noticed my own fashion sense and ability
that's
increasing.
so funny.
But a lot of that is because of my beautiful team, right? Like my
Mhm.
stylist is amazing, my PR folks are amazing. Like and I think that's the thing I didn't realize I needed in the very beginning,
Okay.
nor probably could afford it in a consistent way
Right.
because what they don't tell you is these things are expensive.
Mhm.
They just are, and you're paying for a brand. That is what you're paying for. And so I had to kind of that was the strategy behind it, right? I usually I am a planner in that sense, but
Mhm.
I'll be honest, I wasn't in this instance, and at least in the first season. I think after the first season ended, I was like, okay, this could turn into something really, really big. And
Yes.
for me, I don't believe stuff until I see it myself. So I
Mhm.
didn't believe this was even going to air until I saw the first episode. I was like, this could get cut tomorrow.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that's just real. But when I was like, this is okay, this is real now. Now let me plan. Now let me figure it out. So, but I will say this difference between last season and this season. I mean, there are a couple things. One, someone messaged me actually. They were like, "Oh, you seemed a little different this season. You seemed much more neutral last season." I was like, "Oh, baby, I'm never neutral. Like
Hmm.
neutrality is very harmful. Like I am actually very non-neutral. I will tell you exactly what I feel if you come to me and ask my honest opinion
Right.
about it." And I was like, "But do you see me more outspoken this year? Do you see me actually more engaged this year? Do you like? Yes, those things are true."
Right.
While at the same time acknowledging that was because last year I had a full-time employer, right? So there were certain things that I quite literally did not have the time to
Mhm.
engage in while we were recording and while we were filming. And so I'm grateful to say that the second season, even with the team, I was able to be much more relaxed, much more comfortable in front of the cameras in ways that I just wasn't season one.
Yeah.
And so that to me also is like the growth edge I've recognized quite a bit, but there wasn't a real strategy behind it last season. This season, it is definitely like, you know what? You have a great episode. Let's go to the press. You have a poor episode. Let's
Totally.
go to the press. Like, like
Yeah.
while the press is not always going to be on your side, right? Like, because that's not really their job per se.
Mhm.
I do think it is our job to make sure that we are getting our point across through the press
Right.
good, bad, and ugly, right, wrong, and indifferent.
Yep.
And that is a strategy that I think a lot of us now, I mean, self included, of course, but I think all of us are really going into it this time around.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Someone saying you were neutral is interesting to me because I never got neutral from you. But
Right.
I do think
Hmm.
it is because I'm this way like in life where it's like
Hmm.
I'm not gonna share something with you unless you ask me. If it's like an actual like fight or argument,
Hmm.
right? Like I will
Right.
not get involved unless you go, Ashley, comma, what do you think? Then I will
Uh-huh.
tell you.
Uh-huh.
But I
Yeah.
do think that I mean this season, episode one, you had a crab leg in your hand and it was already popping off like 2 minutes into the episode. And I'm like, oh,
Right.
we're here.
Right.
Like this is
Right.
happening. I
Right. And I'm like, if
yeah.
someone calls me into something, I'm like, yeah, well, sure, let's talk about it now since actually I'm in this now. But I was like, I'm like, in my 38 years of life, I've literally never been called neutral. So I was like, oh, that's a very interesting word to use here.
That is hilarious. Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like, that's not where this was ever headed. But what I also and I told you that I loved like the representation of the Black millennial in the show. For people who don't
Hmm.
know, Summer House, original just Summer House is like a group of people, predominantly white, who spend the summer in the Hamptons, but they still go to
Hmm.
work like in the
Right.
weekends. I mean, sorry,
Hmm.
during the week, and they're in the Hamptons on the weekends, which I love that everybody
Hmm.
is very much so like, I still work, babe. Like this is
Right.
not
Right.
this is not like real world,
Exactly.
whatever. Like I'm still working. And so Summer House Martha's Vineyard is a cast that is all Black, except for Simon, who comes in, I guess, once a season at this
Hmm.
point, Bria's boyfriend. And so y'all will vacation in Martha's Vineyard. It's different because y'all can't like leave in between though. Like you actually have to
Correct.
commit to being in the house for 2 weeks.
Hmm.
So I realized that this season we're tackling a lot of big issues also that impact our community.
Hmm.
You have, Jasmine transitioning from city girl to mom and wife. That
Right.
is going on right now. You have
Yep.
the passing of your father and his
Hmm.
acceptance of you and that story, which I definitely want to dig into.
Right.
Jordan sharing that she has an autoimmune disease.
Hmm.
Shanice being laid off from her job, which obviously I can
Right.
relate to. And then you have straight men not knowing what they want in relationships. Everybody can,
Right.
everybody understands
Right.
that, right?
That's so
So,
real.
how do you all kind of like have the freedom, or how do you handle addressing these issues, but then it's still
Mhm.
light and we're still getting dressed up for a decades party tonight? Like, how do y'all balance that as
Yeah.
people?
That's a brilliant point. I will someone message Alex actually messaged our group this morning just to because we're friends. We really do talk
Yes, I
often. And
love that.
so, was kind of just like I just throughout all the shit that's gonna happen, like I really just want to say I appreciate everyone's vulnerability this season because I really do think all of us, every single one of us, all 10 of us have had a moment where it required us to be vulnerable, right?
Yep.
Where we could have ignored it. We could have
Mhm.
just went along with the get along, just had fun, shots turn up. But that just wasn't the vibe that I think some of us were giving this, or at least we didn't feel that all the time, right? I
Right.
think we were like, well, I'm sad, I'm going to cry,
Mhm.
right? Like I'm angry, I'm going to yell. Like there are different points in our life where I think we were experiencing it all within these 2 weeks. And guess what? Because it didn't start during those 2 weeks.
Yep.
So a lot of things we're experiencing started off season, and naturally, because life doesn't end, we're brought into filming.
Right.
And so I don't even know if it was a struggle for. I mean, certainly there are elements where there is a struggle to talk about like someone's passing or to have
Yeah.
an uncomfortable conversation with your friend to say like, "Hey, you're touching me in a way I don't really like. I'm not saying it's
Yes.
creepy, but I just don't know your dynamics and
Right.
our friendship in that way." And there are things that will hurt your friend, but it's like this is a real moment. The only difference is we're being filmed,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's what makes it more interesting. Now, it is an interesting format because we can't leave. Like we just can't leave. So it's
You're
like
true.
you can either just be in your room for 2 weeks, which clearly cannot happen,
No.
or you will have to be an adult and communicate, whether that's poorly, whether that's effectively. Like you have to have a resolve. And that is what I appreciate about these group of people is that we do find a resolve. Even if the resolve is we don't agree, let's just move on.
Yep.
Right. Like that sometimes is the most mature and self-aware response or resolve. Other times it's like, no, we're gonna actually dig a little deep because
Mhm.
we should and we have to, and then let's go to dinner, you know.
Right. Yeah. And I even thought like there are some like real life situations on here that I feel like you all communicated about brilliantly. Like even with
Mhm.
like Summer and Alex, they hooked up and then he didn't invite
Mhm.
her. to her event, which, like, for people who don't know, like,
hmm
we're recording literally the day after episode 2 airs. And so
Yeah.
she was like, I feel like as someone who's hung out with you, I should be expected to be invited. And he was like, I don't think that's a fair expectation. I was like,
hmm
wow, we are
Uh-huh.
communicating
No.
today.
Yes, and that's real. Like that's why I pray everyone watching this, especially Black folks watching it, I pray that they're like, you know what? Yeah, I've been in this before. I've had this happen before. It's
Like, and
real though.
when Summer said, what did she say? She said something like, I knew what I was getting into. Like, I
hmm
know that this wasn't my partner. No, she didn't. But also, I've been
Yeah,
her. And I've said that exact
yeah.
same thing. And no, I didn't.
Uh-huh.
That's how I know she didn't. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Like, that's what I love about it, that it's so real. Okay. So, what's funny is I had this question written before I saw last night's episode. I just want you to know that just because I thought it was
Love
shady.
you.
And then we get a preview that y'all are actually going to address this. There were 2 people last season who were kicked out of the home.
Mhm.
Okay. Phil
Mhm.
is, I feel like, one hit wonder icon of
Mhm.
Bravo. Came in, didn't get the room he wanted, pooped in someone's toilet who had
Mhm.
that room, not sure how he thought that would get him the room. And he
Right.
disrespected everybody in the house in a record amount of time, and y'all all voted him out very swiftly. Then there's
Mhm.
Mariah, who
Mhm.
is actually not guilty of the crime that she was charged for,
Right.
metaphorical crime, not a real one,
Right.
where Bria's dog's laundry was put in with her laundry, but she's not the one who put it in there. And the person who didn't speak up about it until she was already kicked out of the
Right.
house. Okay.
Exactly.
So, in your opinion, obviously don't reveal anything,
Yeah.
but your opinion, who deserves a second chance more?
Oh, more Mariah
Okay.
instantly. Oh my God. That
Mhm.
is that is so easy. And I think so that's an easy answer with the more. I
Mhm.
think what became conflicting for me is Phil, just generally speaking.
Mhm.
I would only share so much, but I think like even I mean the that part was released obviously more so we know what that will come in the next episode.
Right.
But for me it was tricky because in some instances, Phil did make me feel unsafe. And I don't mean that
Mhm.
like in a very hyperbolic way, but like he reminded me of many instances of like homophobic Black men who I went to middle school and
Mm.
high school with and family members. And I think, it started to trigger me for real, for real. Like I was like, oh, what is this? This is a lot happening in this moment. And remember, right? Like I'm there. So like maybe everything can't be shared, but it was that scene was a lot, but it was a lot more what was not shown.
Which is crazy because it was
And
a lot to
so,
watch.
yeah, and so I had to be like, okay, the person I know I am is someone who really do try to give folks grace and really
Mhm.
be like, that was a very bad moment for you. I actually do not know you. And what do we do with this? Right? Like
Right.
what do we do when I think you actually are more than what you portrayed?
Mm.
And fuck you, right? Like how do you balance both of these things? And so I think you'll see, for me in particular, you'll see both of those play out when it comes to Phil.
Yeah.
Because I didn't feel bad, but I was like, this is like, how do I really feel about Black folks, right? Like that
Right.
for me, I was battling my own internal things there.
Oh.
Mariah, that's my girl. So
I feel like
I
most of
am,
y'all were apprehensive about that at the time too. Like you can see it in
yeah,
y'all's faces. Like,
yeah. With regarding
hmm,
Mariah,
yes,
yeah, because it kind of didn't make sense. Like there were some components we were like, because some of us really know her, so we were like,
yeah,
oh, like this doesn't make sense because you got a child, and I know you're missing him, and I know there's a lot personally you're going through that I will never share. That is only on her to share. But it
hmm,
was just as a friend, I was like, I know there is a lot
more here.
here,
Yes.
and I never wanted to see her. Like I that is my girl. And so, like, 100%. That's an easy answer.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't, I'm interested to see how the conversation goes because also another A plus communication moment when Phil was acting up for the 10th time in like one
Mhm.
hour, you were like, if he's not going, I'm going. And then I
Yeah.
think Amir was next and then Alex was next. And at that
Uh-huh.
point, there's solidarity. Like, yeah, he can
Yeah.
go or you don't have a show. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is
Right. Because we were serious. I'm telling you, behind the scene, we were like, no, no, no. Cut all of this.
honey,
Like,
a
we are
producer
actually
who's
not
8 feet
joking.
tall had to come
Right.
out to put him in timeout. A grown man.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh my
that was a
goodness.
lot. And I definitely think like the us on cast, we definitely have very different opinions about both. I mean, I think
Interesting.
based on last season, you can certainly see the person, right, who would have the issue with Mariah just based on
Yes.
last season. I don't think that's true for the majority of us. But I think with Phil, I want most of us were on the same page,
Mm-hmm.
except for a couple people. Except for a couple people.
Yeah.
And I would love to actually know your thoughts afterward.
Sorry, I'm
Oh,
Oh,
I
oh,
see.
trust me, I'll have a bunch.
Uh-huh.
When I heard them y'all say that at the end of this episode, I was like, "No way are they actually gonna have
Hmm.
this discussion." Like, I can't wait. But I'm
Look,
sure
you saw my facial expression.
honey, well, and even just knowing like Jasmine's the one presenting it, I'm assuming it's to
Hmm.
advocate for Mariah, which I'm excited for
Hmm.
because I also believe that she deserves a second chance.
Hmm.
Um, for people who have not watched this phenomenal program yet,
Hmm.
how would you describe the best parts of it to people? Like, why should someone, even
Yeah.
someone who's not Black, this is just a good
Oh
show, right?
yeah.
Like, how
No.
do
Mhm.
you explain to people what the show is and why they should watch it?
You know how I describe it to people? So I'm like, have you seen the real world? And they're like, of course. And I'm like, all right. I said, well, think about the real world, except we're not strangers and we're all Black.
Mhm.
Like that, like think about the dynamics when you and your friends are on vacation, right? The love, the friendships, the messiness, the drama, the shade, like all of it. Like just think about that. Think about if you had cameras following you and your friends around on a trip somewhere else, right? And
Hmm.
all the things that y'all get into. And they're like, okay, I'll watch it. I'll watch it.
And really, it's not a tough sell. Like, you could just tell
Mhm.
somebody to watch the first episode, and I don't think it's a tough
Yeah.
sell personally. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
biased by it.
Well, no,
Um,
even when we saw the first episode of this season, I mean, like we loved last season, of course, but when we saw the first episode of this season, we were like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, this is
oh,
good. Like, as if we weren't even in it.
coming in hot, when I tell you hot, and that is, I think that's why everyone thinks that them and their friends, or why they want to be on reality TV, because you go
Mhm.
through something, but then you want to see how it looked from the outside. You want to know what everybody
Exactly.
thought. You want to hear the confessionals. Like, I think that
Uh-huh.
has to be the funnest part of the whole thing, is being
Yeah.
able to relive it in that way.
No,
Um,
agreed.
So I also wonder, because obviously we had a great discussion before we got into the Bravo mess. I
Mhm.
always end my episodes with advice that you would give
Mhm.
people, but I feel like your story is just so interesting and you've been so vulnerable here today that I wonder what advice you would give your younger self, because I feel like
Mm.
that could also help a lot of people.
Gosh. Hmm. Oftentimes, this is interesting. It makes me. I don't know how much you watch or if you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, but usually, like around the top three, top four, she asks the drag queens this,
Hmm.
and they'll provide a little baby picture of themselves. So I'm thinking of this baby Preston version of
Yes.
myself. The reality is, you don't know what you're gonna go through, obviously, right? Like in your life. I mean, I would tell my younger self though, like it is completely unfair what you had to go through. It
Mm,
is completely unfair that in many ways you did not have the love and support that you wished you had as a Black queer boy, the
mm,
ability to be creative and to be free. And you may even go through some trauma, but guess what? You are going to be that Black queer man who will be free, who will be creative, who will explore all the things that you never thought you would explore. And you're gonna be so dope, right? And you're gonna be on a
sheesh.
reality TV show and people are gonna know your name, right?
And
That
people
that
will
is
love you.
right, and people will love you. That to me is what I would really share with my younger self.
Wow. Preston, thank you for this. I could have gone on for an hour, but I'm not going to do that to
Set.
you. But I appreciate you so much for being willing to come here, be vulnerable, be open, and engage in the mess. I appreciate all
Oh
of that
yes.
from you. So thank you so much for your
Thank,
time, and keep
thank
shining and
you.
keep being our shining star on Martha's Vineyard, because I am obsessed with all of it.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been a joy. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll have to do it again, maybe at the end of the season or something, because
Oh, I
I
would love that.
know what's going to happen. So
No,
yes,
I would love that.
fantastic. All right, awesome.